Hey everybody, we're going to get started in about 8 minutes or so. We're going to start right at 2 o'clock Eastern on time. In the meantime, if you haven't already, open up your chat window. You can, depending on the client you're on, you can get there through window chat, and also open up your participants pane. That'll give you some controls for raising hands and some other feedback controls. So I'll be back in a couple minutes to get started. All right, everybody, good afternoon. We've got about 31 people already, and that's awesome. Everybody can hear me okay, I hope. Let me see. Looks good, looks good. So if this is your first Zoom with me, I guess it could be your second or your first, a couple of quick housekeeping things. You're going to want to open your participants tab. You can find that depending on the client that you're on. It'll either be at the bottom or somewhere in your menu system. If you open the participants tab, that'll give you a set of controls. It'll give you some voting controls, yes, no, go slower, go faster. It'll also give you a little raise hand icon. So if you have a question throughout the whole thing, one of the ways you can get my attention is by hitting that raise hand button. And if you do, it will automatically move, whoever does it first will move you to the top of my list. You also want to open up the live text chat, message there. Sometimes if you have a question, that's the easiest way to throw it in there is in that live text chat. So I'll read those kind of as they come in real time. Okay, let's get started. So welcome everybody. My name is Mike Wood. I'm a theatrical designer, educator kind of person. Currently without work because of the wonderful situation we find ourselves in the world. So what I'm trying to do in these next couple weeks is take a lot of my master classes that I do at institutions around the country and turn those into a virtual format. We had our first one on Thursday. I've got a few more coming up. I'll throw the link in the chat here for you if you're interested in the others. Today's isn't really a class. This is kind of more of a live demo. Those of you who've been following me for a while, you know I've been working for almost 6 years now on my own paperwork software. Using the word software is kind of the wrong term for it. It's actually a solution that's based in FileMaker. If you're not familiar with FileMaker, FileMaker is a database tool that allows you to create relational databases. So why did I do this? Well, it started because I was probably 2014 or so, I was doing all kinds of shows and doing all kinds of paperwork, but I was using 5 different pieces of software to do them, right? So we were using Excel, we were using Google Sheets, we were using Vectorworks, we were using Lightwrite, and then programs to do spot queues and all of that other stuff. And all of these programs, some of which could kind of talk to each other, but many of them that kind of lived on their own little islands and didn't really do a really good job of talking with one another. So I kind of set out to my first goal was to come up with something that I could do my work notes in. I use Lightwrite still to this day, but I still have never really liked the way that it handled work notes. I wanted something that was a little more customizable and something that I could send different kinds of data and just manipulate in different ways. So I set out on the very first version of this FileMaker database to make a work note solution, and then it kind of just snowballed from there. So I'll preface everything I'm going to show today with the fact that I'm completely self-taught in FileMaker. So I have done a lot of like online classes and things like that. But when I first started this project, I knew literally nothing. So I started from the ground up and kind of taught myself through trial and error. So because of that, some of the underlying relationships and code that hold some of this together are horribly inefficient. And that's one of the reasons I don't release this to the public. So maybe if this lasts for as long as we think it's going to last, maybe I'll start from the ground up and write something a little bit more efficient. So my goal today is to not necessarily give you a step-by-step, this is exactly how you need to lay this out, but instead I'm going to show you what I did and kind of the tools that I use my FileMaker solution for in hopes that it will help to inspire some ideas in some of you. I have put on my YouTube channel, there's the first and hopefully a series of videos as well of some of the tools that I use for this. And so if there's interested in that after today, I'll start breaking some of those other things out. So let's go ahead and get started. On my screen here, I've got a couple of windows open. This one right here that you see, this is the user interface for the paperwork management portal. So if I open up my menu bars here, you can see that all this is it's just a FileMaker layout. If I change the layout view here, you can see all of these things are fields that I can edit just like you could if you had just like you were building your own custom FileMaker thing. My very first FileMaker database that I made didn't really have a user interface. It was just a series of tables and a series of fields, and it was not super efficient. The user interface is a whole month's worth of work in and of itself. So it starts out here with production. So in this area, I can set up my production name. I can put in things like logos, and these are container fields that allow me to throw logos in. I've got things like what version of the paperwork it is. These things will all be become important later as we go through it. But basically, as I choose these options here, you're able to see this stuff will print on every single piece of paperwork we made. So a big thing for me is version tracking. I don't like just to send out a document unless it has a date on it, and unless it has a version number on it. So if I'm an electrician and I'm sitting in the theater, I know that, okay, I'm looking at this thing, but it's 3 weeks old. There's got to be a new update after this. So I'm able to have that all uniform between my plots and every single piece of my paperwork. So I set up all my production information here. I can put in opening dates, locations, stuff like that. Fun little thing. It shows you how many days there are until opening, which can be nerve-wracking at some points. And also really quick, let me point out in those participant controls, if you do want me to slow down at all, please go ahead and click that go slower button that I just clicked there. That'll give me a little bit of feedback. And please, again, feel free to shoot a text chat or a hand up to keep chatting. So from there, I set up my people. So this is basically anybody who's involved with my show in any way, they get a entry here. So all this is, if I open up my database table, or excuse me, my database manager, this is a table that has several fields in it for all the things that might have to do with a particular person. So for instance, the first record here, this is me. I'm the lighting designer. I assign a category, a phone number, an email. All of these things are important because it allows us to customize what we print on the top of our paperwork. And it also, in addition to that, I have tools built in here to email people and to call people directly from your computer. So if I click this button, it'll email me. If I click this button, it'll open up a blank email CCing everybody. And all of those things, those are all basically just pretty simple FileMaker scripts. So it's a single step right here. And all it does is it goes through that database, it goes through that table, and it collects email addresses and puts this title in there of the show name and the current time. So this is really powerful for work notes and things like that. I can click one button and send all of the work notes I need to send out. Right now, this is only the lighting department in here. I haven't put other people in yet, but you can sort it by department. I made a director and I assigned them to the, let's say, the directing department. You can see now that's being split up, so I can print contact sheets based on department. I can email just departments. I can do all that kind of stuff. So it's a really great communication tool as well. Some of these features, like the calling and stuff like that, only work on the Apple version or the Mac OS version of this. FileMaker is cross-platform, so you can work in it on Mac or on PC. I have another thing that will, it'll send iMessages of work notes to people, which is also pretty cool. So from there, we start to set up our show itself. So there's another table. If I open up my database manager here, you can see here's another table, scenes and songs, and it has a set series of records in there. Scene start, scene start page, scene end page, a description, a number. Again, all of this stuff is set up because it's going to be referenced later on in the program. So you see, this was actually what you're looking at right now is a combination of 2 shows worth of data. So I've been starting to set this up for my next show, but I was using the data from the previous show. So you're going to see some stuff in here that was from Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, whereas other stuff is going to be specific to Footloose, just because we haven't gotten in and done the Footloose stuff other than the rig paperwork yet. So all these things get set up here. I can say if it's a scene or a song or a break, so if it's intermission, I can choose what all of those things are. Also has this fun little thing over here where it tells me how many lighting cues or spot cues are in each scene. Not really that important, but it's fun to do. And then from there, I basically am ready to start working with my show. So I use Lightright, and on Thursday, I'm going to be doing a demo of this, of how I use Lightright in Vectorworks. Lightright sound, thank you, John. I do all of my initial data entry in Lightright. Once I get all this information put in here and I go back and forth between the Vectorworks, I come in and I do an export of this. So I have an automated action set up for it, but basically all it really is exporting a CSV. Let me pull up my thing here. It's exporting a CSV that has just the information from the Lightright that I want in it. So my purpose, my channel, my dimmer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Once I do that, I'm able to import that into FileMaker here. So if I hit import Lightright, computer is not super happy with me because of the the amount of stuff happening right now. I can import that particular file that I exported right here, which if you look at it is just, again, a CSV that contains all of my information about each individual light. And then it allows me to match fields, which for the most part are already all matched. If I click OK, it'll bring all of those lights into my program for me. So we open up our instrument worksheet. So now you see we have a LightRight, a similar worksheet kind of what LightRight also looks like, that I can sort by channel, I can sort by dimmer, I can sort by circuit. I can do little things like looking at just certain positions. Excuse me. Can look at certain instrument types. All of those things that LightRight can do, I can also do in here. The challenge with this is because LightRight works kind of like a spreadsheet where I can click a bunch of records at once and edit. Let's say I want to edit all of my top colors. That's easy to do in LightRight. It's not as easy to do in FileMaker because of the way FileMaker is designed. Again, FileMaker is designed to have individual records in tables, and those tables have data that relates to one another. So I can't come in here and I can't like click and drag down and select multiple things. So that's why I still do a lot of my other work in LightRight. But once it's in here, it's pretty much good to go. You know, obviously there's changes as we go through the production process. As things edit, as things change, I'm able to just re-import that LightRight information again, and it updates all of the records that I have within this. One of the fields that I export when I export that LightRight is a field called LightRight ID. If we come in here and look at this real quick, you can see what I'm talking about. This LightRight ID field is unique to every instrument and it does not change. So when I come back in and I do a re-import after a plot change, it's able to find the existing records, update them, and it's also able to go and add new ones if they didn't already exist. And I'm currently working in ways that it doesn't fully work right now, but to delete ones that you've deleted as well. And that's going to be, you know, through a series of scripts that basically says, oh, wait a second, I noticed that this LightRight ID exists in your show, but it wasn't in this recent update. Do you want to delete it? So that's one of my projects for this little hiatus. So I can sort by all of those things. As you can see, I can sort by position. When I sort by position, of course, it gives me little breaks so I can see all that information. You know, I have little color swatches here. The color swatches are actually done. So this is something that took me a while to figure out a good solution for. The color swatches are done by, these are actually little Unicode block characters that are just formatted to have the color of that particular gel. So I forgot where I found it. It might have been in Vectorworks or somewhere. I found a CSV of RGB values for all of the various color, so I'm trying to find something here. For all of the various gel colors that were out there. So what I did is I imported all of that information and I made a script that went through and went ahead and dropped these little blocks in there and colored them according to those RGB values that we found. And so every gel color that exists, I've got a swatch for here. And then at the bottom, I've also added my own. So things like RGB or splits or anything like that, I can come in here and I can add, and they'll show up all throughout the program wherever I have them. So let me close this other window here. So in addition to my instrument worksheet where I can see a lot of information at once and edit a lot of information at once, I also have instrument data and a focus assistant page here. So on this instrument data sheet, I can quickly see all of the various pieces of information that I might need to see about any given instrument. So again, you know, position, purpose, all that stuff that you would normally see. But I also have any work notes that are available about that particular light. I've got patch information here, so I can say what kind of patch or what kind of fixture it is and what kind of manufacturer it is. I'll get to that in a little bit. And then I also have information about data on here, and I'll get to that in a second as well. This is also where I can put in focus information. I have another version of this called Focus Assistant. It's a little more optimized for an iPad. So I can come in here and I can put in cuts. I can do shutter cuts. I can do beam details. I can click up, down. I can click this way, this way, this way, as well as all of this so that I can then print focus charts. You can drop in photos for every light. You can drop in actually up to 3 photos for every single light. You can also take work notes. There's a quick button here. So during focus, let's say we had an assistant or somebody who was on this program going light by light. If I had a work note, so we're going to add 132 to that, I could click that button, and then it's going to ask me, has this been done yet? I say yes or no. If it has been done, then it'll just add that color to the field, which of course it already was, so let me get rid of that. If it hasn't been done, it'll create a work note for it. So little cool things like that. So I'll get back to fixtures in a second. Let's kind of keep looking forward. So once I've imported all of my fixture data, I have a thing here called inventory. So this is similar to in Lightright. You know, you have your maintenance and you have your instrument type, where you're able to set up all of the instrument types that you have in your show. And very similar to Lightright, this table is based on the fixtures that you have imported from your Lightright file. So it pulls in all of these fixture names, and all this other data you see here comes from a database, or excuse me, comes from a table that I have working behind the scenes that contains information about weights and color frames and profiles and things like that. Because most of my shows use the EOS family of lighting consoles, I have that direct integration built in, where I have the EOS model and I have an EOS profile. These match up exactly with the names of the profiles within EOS. And every version of EOS that comes out, I go through and I pull from the library all of those names. So this one, I haven't done it in a while. It's still back on 2.7.4. You see I'm running 3.0 for the demo I'm doing today. But I have all those names in here. It gives me DMX, how many DMX channel information, how many DMX addresses it takes up. All that information comes in here. The reason all this is important, you're going to see that in a second, is because, again, I'm trying to, the whole idea of when I created this was to create a single database solution that related all of this data back to one another. So it's important for me to know that a 10-degree source for is 15 pounds, because then when I go in here to my position setup, I can now go position by position and see exactly how much weight is hung on every single position. So this particular show was not a proscenium theater show. This is an outdoor show that takes place in a field. And so we're bringing in everything. It's not as big of a concern with this one, but when I'm doing a proscenium show, I could walk in with a schedule for my fly people right away and say, all right, this is the first electric, it's going to weigh this many pounds, or this is this truss, it weighs this many pounds. I can put a tear weight in there, so you know these 70-foot worth of truss weighed 400 pounds, so it's automatically in the background going in and adding that 400 pounds to the weight of my the fixtures that I have in there. It also figures out wattage, amperage, based on right now it's based on a system voltage per position. It doesn't really handle if I've got, let's say I've got 208 and 120 at the same position. It doesn't do that yet because I haven't had a need for it yet, but that need is hopefully coming up soon if this show works out the way it does. So I'm going to have to change some stuff around. I've just been getting really lucky where pole positions are either 208 or hole positions are 120 with a lot of the shows that I've been doing. But you can see also in here I can put in the names automatically are populated from the fixture information that comes in. I can put my own notes in here. Automatically counts how many fixtures are on that based again on that information coming in from the Lightright. I can choose what type it is, so I have all of these things set up already. I can put my trim information here. I can put trimming to, trimming from, et cetera, all to create really detailed documentation both for the electrician and for the rigging people that are involved with the show. Let's see what's next. So next is focus areas. So I haven't been using this as much, but if we want to do focus charts for our show, this is where this comes into play. So I'm going to create a dummy one here. I'm going to call it Focus Area A, and I'm going to give it some measurements. So let's say Focus Area A was 0 foot upstage, 0 foot downstage, so it's right on the plaster line, 0 foot stage right, but it's maybe 10 foot stage right, or excuse me, stage left, but 10 foot stage left, stage right. And then with scenery notes, let's say shutter off of portable. And I could put other information there. And then if I had a picture of where I wanted that, I could drop that in here. So let me just pull up this plot real quick. And I'm just going to take a quick screenshot of this little square. I can come in here then and I can paste that right in there. So now I've got that screenshot. So now, again, because this is a relational database, what I'm able to do is come back into my instrument data. And if I assign that focus area to this light, you can see that all of that information automatically shows up here. So this is done with a portal. So if you're familiar with FileMaker at all, hopefully you're familiar with the concept of portals. But basically what this is this is referencing data on another table. So I have a table here that has all of my instrument information on it, and then I have a separate table that has all of my focus areas on it. So what this portal is doing is it's basically saying, show related records from focus areas, and I want to filter those records when the instrument information focus area equals my focus area focus area. So I know that sounds like a lot of words, but basically what that means is it's looking through that other table for any focus areas that have the same name as the focus area that I just attached to that instrument. So for instance, if I were to go back and I were to change this to B and come out of that field, you see all that stuff disappears. But I'm going to leave this window open for a second and open a new window. If I come back to my focus areas and I create a B focus area, let's say this is 20 feet. I'm just going to put a 2 there so you see the difference. Now you notice behind me, all this other information has popped in and populated. So this is super useful for basically like rough focusing things. So, when I'm focusing a front light system, I do have areas marked out, and I would mark them A through whatever, and that information would come in here. And then the shutter information I can type in on a fixture by fixture basis. So I can put all that information in here. I can put rotation, I can put sharpness, et cetera, all in here. And then when I put my focus chart, it'll give me, the first page is a map of all of the focus areas, and then every other page is a fixture with all of the information specific to that fixture on it. You can see it also drops in the graphic there. I'm working right now on automatic image capture. I have it kind of working a little bit, but I've got a better way that somebody suggested to do it, so I'm going to be working on that soon. Let's say I wanted to drop a photo in for it. I could, if I had my own photos, oops, that's interesting, because it's not downloaded. If I wanted to drop my own photo in there, I'll use that good old photo of Dalton that he kills me for every time I use it. I can drop any pictures I want into any of these 3 boxes. So typically when I use this, I do a front of house shot. Maybe I'll do, if it's a side light or something like that, I'll do a fixture point of view shot for focus B. And then for the instrument detail, this would be like if I had something that was hung in a really weird way, I might drop a photo of it in there, depending on the run of the show, just so that whoever was looking at this documentation a month down the line would be able to see exactly how it was hung and how it was used. So that's that. Let me jump a few lights and find an automated light here. So here's an Elation Proteus hybrid. So you can see I've got patch information here. I'll go over that real quick. So that patch information is useful when it comes to the EOS link that I have set up. So with this EOS link, I do have an entire video about how to set this up on my YouTube channel. So go check that out if you're interested in FileMaker development at all. It's a series of plugins that are used in order to send strings from FileMaker to EOS and actually to get strings back as well. I'm not going to be going into the getting things back today because I'm still developing that, but the sending stuff works pretty well. So what we're looking at, let me go ahead and do a couple of quick questions here. So first question was, what's the purpose? So yeah, so I did cover this in the beginning, but basically this is to get all of my information into one place, everything from cues to rig information to work notes, everything, et cetera, et cetera. And how long did it take? I started it in 2014, and it's still very much ongoing in development. Next question, do you use your iPhone for focus pictures, or do you have a professional camera you use? So yes and no. Yes and yes, I guess. I use both things. I actually have an iPhone version of this that I probably should have worked on being able to show you today. But basically, I have an iPhone version where you can take photos directly from your phone as long as you're on the same network as the FileMaker. So FileMaker has a mobile version called FileMaker Go, and I have a series of layouts, which I probably can just open up here real quick if I know where they are. I have a series of layouts called, yeah, here we go, iPhone layouts. So this is formatted to fit that screen. So if I were to click on focus photos, it's going to then give me this, again, imagine this is on an iPhone. It's going to give me this interface that shows me channel number. I can then click in here and I can either take a photo live from the phone. You can see this was a picture of my glasses when I was testing this, or I can choose one from my library if I already had photos taken. So that's a whole other side of this app that I've been working on is the iPhone and iPad version. I use the iPad instead of the iPhone, and the reason for that is because, unfortunately, for some reason, with FileMaker, you are not able to script out the camera flash. So if you're using an iPhone and of course you're in a low light situation, There's no way I can choose resolution, I can choose which camera it is, but I'm not able to say no flash. So on an iPad, that's not a problem because there's no flash anyway. So I just use my iPad when I'm doing that. The thing I'm working on currently is an integration with the Canon Eos Utility, which is the remote capture program for the Canon cameras. And basically it uses Apple script to snap photos, drop them in a folder, and then pull them into the database. So that way, again, is not super efficient. I've had a couple people suggest a few things, other ways for me to do it using some Blackmagic devices that I already use. So once I get that a little more along, I'll update on that and let you know if that's working. So anyway, so EOS integration. So right here, I'm using basically only UDP strings right now. I'm starting to work on OSC a little bit, but it's not quite ready for prime time. Within EOS, I'm going to open up my settings here, and under string UDP, I'm going to set receive on, and I'm going to be sending on port 8000. No reason for 8000, it's just the number that happened to be in there for some reason. And I'm also going to specify an IP address. This is my local machine, 1.170. I have noticed that at least on Mac and at least with these versions of FileMaker, you can't use local host address. You do have to type in the actual IP address of your computer, even if you're running it on the same thing. So what this allows me to do now is it allows me to send raw UDP strings over to the EOS running on the same computer. And I can see that here if I open up my diagnostics window. Let's say I'm going to send this string as user. What user am I? This is user 3. So I'm going to say gen1 full, enter. When I send it, you see now that's showed up over here, but of course I've got a syntax error because I haven't patched any of my show yet. But you can see it comes in here as user 1, or excuse me, user 3. I can also change what user that's sending on. So I could send this on user 99, send it over. You see it now showing up in my diagnostics window, but it's not actually posting to my command line because I'm not sending to my current user. So where does this come in handy? This comes in super handy because I can actually use this to patch my entire show. So earlier when we were looking at our fixture inventory here, I pointed out that I have the EOS fixture libraries built directly into the program. So I've got the model and I've got the profile all here. The reason I have them specifically from EOS with the exact same formatting is because then I have a script that can basically send all of that information over as individual strings to do all this patching. Now, you might be thinking that doesn't seem like an efficient way to do that in the world of OSC, and you'd be 100% right, but I just haven't developed it. This I kind of made, this is something I made a long time ago when I was developing these parts, so I haven't fully updated that yet. But I'll go ahead and show you. So I'm going to open up the patch window. You see I've got nothing currently there. Within my EOS database here, I'm mapping fields. So this is saying, all right, I want to send purpose to my label field. I want to send color to my gel field. I want to send address data. I want to send type data. And I want to send things to my text fields in EOS as well. So I'm going to click this button once. And it's going to look like it's doing nothing. It's going to finish here. EOS is going to be frozen for a second as it gets overwhelmed with data. And then sometimes it takes 10, 20 seconds, it will show me all of that patched information. Hopefully. There it goes. So now if I scroll all the way back up to channel 1, you can see I've got all that information already in here. And see it came in with my label information and stuff as well. And if we go back to our diagnostics window, you can see it sent just a whole lot of strings telling me what to do. It said, you know, user 3, edit target, patch. Tell me what to do with the text fields, all of that kind of stuff. So I talk about this a lot more in depth in that YouTube video that I made. So I encourage you to go check it out. It's only about 10 minutes long, and I show you how to set this up from scratch with the plugins on your own without any other parts to the software. So definitely go check that out. Now, if I come in here to live, of course, you can see trying to do this all on screen instead of using hotkeys, so you can see what I'm doing. But now I have just my patched instruments here. You see, this show is actually not very big. It's a relatively small show. I've got some multi-cell stuff, but not a whole lot of other fixtures. So now, once I've got all that information in there, it's super cool because now, as I'm doing this with my Focus Assistant, if I want to turn that N21 on, I can come in here and turn on that channel. Oh, that's interesting. That looks like a change in 3.0. I think I need to update my syntax. So I had to click it twice, but you can see it turned it on. I can then come in here and I can sneak it as well. All right, well, now I have to update my stuff. Thanks, CTC. But you can see, you get the idea. I can turn lights on, I can turn lights off. The cool part about this Focus Assistant is you can have multiple windows of it open at the same time, and each window can be sorted by different things. So I can sort this window by, let's say, position, and I can have this on my first electric. I could have this window on my cove or my front of house position, and then jump back and forth between people focusing at the same time on those two positions. Question just came in. How are you handling EOS fixture type libraries? Are you maintaining a value list of types and modes, or are you sourcing it? Yes, so both. I'm sourcing it from ETC themselves. So when ETC releases a new fixture library, there's an HTML file within in the README section of that fixture library that has a CSV, it might be a CSV or it might be tabs, I don't remember, but either way, it's a file that contains all of the DMX information, the manufacturers, the profiles, everything that is in that particular release of EOS software. And so within that, I have a behind the scenes, go to it here. I don't know 100% where it is, let me find it. But within that, I have, here we go, EOS fixture profiles. See, this is, I don't have this pretty at all, but I'm able to come in here and I'm able to import all of that as its own table. So if I open up my fixture profiles here, there are 27,883 records within that table. So basically, anytime I'm putting that information into a fixture, it's going in and it's looking it up based on both the manufacturer and the model number. So I'm not putting all these in manually. This is all, I'm automating this based on that information that's coming with each EOS release. Okay. Great, so you can see how that's powerful within the Focus Assistant. I can turn lights on, I can turn lights off. I can also do it within my work notes, which we haven't even gotten to yet. I'll get to that in a second. Actually, I'll get to that in a second. So I can also set up my gobos in here. I've got this set up to be pretty cool where, again, it will find any gobos that I have within my show. I don't have a stock of gobo images in PMP just because of the amount of file size that would take up. It would bloat the file so much. So instead what I have is if you have the name typed in here, you can click this little magnifying glass and it will open up a Chrome window or whatever your browser is and automatically Google search for that gobo name and then the word gobo. And I find it fun if you search for GAM 579, for those of you how much I love it, I actually have, where did it go? Well, last week when I searched for it, oh wait, it was GAM. And of course now it's not doing it. I searched for GAM 579 last week and a bunch of stuff from my website came up, so that was fun. But it also then, of course, it counts them up. I can put in spares if I want spares. I can also put in, let's say the theater has a stock of 10 of them already. So it'll calculate those things automatically. And that's all pretty simple math. All it's doing in here is it's doing, where is it? Stock name, item count. Oh, that's not it. You can see them on the screen here. It's counting up how many I have. It's I'm able to put in information for the stock, and then it will automatically subtract based on those two fields. It'll subtract and give me a calculation for how many I have left. So what I'm able to do is not only am I able to print out a sheet that has information for every gobo in my show, but I'm able to print out a sheet that tells my producer exactly how many gobos of each type we need to order. So it's not, the electrician doesn't have to sit there and do all that work manually. Typically, I'll get some kind of an Excel file or a Word file or something that has that inventory in it. So if there's a gobo I want, I'll just copy that information over into my FileMaker file, and it does all that math for me. And again, if let's say I wanted 10 spares, of course now it's recalculated that to know that I'm -2 under, and I'm going to need to order 2. Okay, so that's gobos. Colors, this was probably the hardest thing for me to do. So this information for color is all referenced again back to that initial fixture information. It takes a combination of the fixture information as well as the inventory information to figure out what frame size everything is. So it'll tell me how many cuts of each kind I have, excuse me, as well as how many spares, so I can manually add spares. So let's say, I use, in my musical theater work, I use a lot of Lee 71 as my Congo wash. Typically, I want to have the theater order extra of that because it's going to burn out. So I would put that information in here and also put notes in for each color thing that will print with that information. I can choose which ones I want to print, which ones I don't want to print. The thing that I don't have right now is, so for example, these are all double frames, right? So it's frost with this color. So it's counting that as a framed cut. Lightright, you can do framed cuts and individual cuts. I know in my head how I'm going to do it. I just have not implemented it yet because it just hasn't been an issue yet. But this does, unfortunately, it only counts frames. It doesn't count individual cuts yet. So I'm working on that, but it's been pretty useful for most of our projects so far. It also then can calculate sheets you need. And again, that math is still a little rusty because it's, for instance, if I needed Lee 202, for example, I've got 2 different kinds of Lee 202 cuts here. And so it will count those as separate things and not as one sheet. I haven't quite figured out the right math to do multiple cuts on a sheet. It's going to have to do with like figuring out square inches and stuff like that, all the stuff that I ignored in high school geometry class, but I'll figure it out. So I set up all my color information there. I can also set up groups, which is pretty cool. So, a lot of us will do, probably the most common group is either a group by position or a group by purpose. So let's say I want to make group 1. I can automatically create those things based on the data that I already have in my database. So for example, I want to create a group that's based on purpose. And I can then choose a purpose. Let's say front coming from in this side. I hit get contents. Okay, that's interesting. Let's try this one. I love it when a demo doesn't work, right? Well, I'm not sure why that isn't working. It's never not worked before. But typically what it would do is it would go through and it would put all my channel numbers in whatever order I've specified. So if it's a purpose order, it's going to do them in channel order. If I do a position, maybe it'll work if I do positions. Let's say downstage truss. There it goes. So I do downstage truss, it put them in unit order. So that way, when I create the group, let's say I'm making a group that does a channel check or a fixture or a position check for me, I'm able to have it in unit number order so I can quickly pop through it. Now what I can do is I can come in here and I can click the send button. And if I go to my groups window, you can see it's recorded that group. It's sent the label over and the channels in the proper order. So I've been working on some other things where I can do this automatically for groups. So you can put in a start number, put in an end number, and then have it automatically fill it. So let's say I'll do upstage truss here, get contents, send. And again, you notice it's posting to my command line in EOS right now, but that's only because back with my EOS settings, I have it set up as user 3. I come back to my groups here for a second. You can see that set up. If I go back to my EOS settings and I change this to, let's say, user number 99, now I'm able to do all of those same things again. Let's duplicate it. I'll make this group 3. I'm able to do all those same things, but they won't post to the command line of the current user. So let me delete this, get contents. Okay, well, that's a bad example. It's only one light. Stage right truss. Get contents, send. Interesting. Oops. Oh, there it goes. I don't know why it didn't work the first time. That's part of the thing with using UDP strings. Sometimes they don't send, which is one of the reasons that I want to work on getting this OSC implemented. But you can kind of get the idea. You get the idea of how powerful this can be. I can sit there and I can pre-program all of my groups based on positions all within this without having to sit at the console and do it. It's also super powerful because, again, all of this information is all based on that Lightright file. So I'm not sitting there, I'm not doing a whole bunch of extra data entry. All that information was already here. So I'm just figuring out ways to take that data, relate it to other things, and then send that over to the console easily. So that's groups in a nutshell. Okay, so we did groups. I also have multi-cable in here, so I can set up my Socapex runs. This is super useful because it actually, when I do this park show every year, we rent everything. We rent every single piece of cable, we rent every single dimmer, we rent everything that comes in. So I need to have a very specific idea of what we need for the show. I've had some electricians use this as well, but typically I'm the only one who's using these features for this particular show. But in here, I'm able to basically spell out every single multi-cable, where it starts, where it stops, what lengths of each segment I need, This is all information that will become useful later, you'll see, because it'll actually generate for me a shop order of all the power cable, all the signal cable that I need. I can come in here with my break-ins and my breakouts, and I can specify a connector for each one of my tails. So yeah, there's that. I can then set up individual circuits. So all of these circuit names you see that come in here, this A1, E1, all that information, again, comes in automatically based on the light right. And then I go in here on top of that and I start saying what I need for each one of those circuits. So currently it's set up to have no more than 10 segments, which if you're putting 10 things on a single line, maybe there's another problem going on. So basically I can come in here and when I look at my plot, I can figure out, okay, F1 is going to the upstage truss. I know I need a 25-foot true one, then there's going to be a fixture and a 15. I can figure out all this information to know exactly what I need. And again, these are all important because at the end, I'll go through and it'll count all this information for me and prepare a shop order for me in order to send to my rental shop to know exactly how much I need. But also, again, because everything is related to one another, it tells me what dimmer that circuit is on. It tells me what connector type that circuit is. That was set up before. So when I set up my breakout and I say, all right, this is a female L620, it's going to show me that here. Shows me how many instruments are on that particular circuit. I can also then set up dimmers. So right now it has support for ETC sensor racks because that's what I use most often. It's got phase templates, things like that. So you can see these things are split up. This is a small 24 circuit touring rack. I can choose a dimmer type. So let's say this was an R20. You could do that and it will color code it for me. And then, of course, I can print a report that tells me how many D20 modules I need, how many R20 modules I need. Rack types tells me exactly how much wattage there is at each one. Unfortunately, it doesn't do phase balancing, so I still do that within Lightright. But again, it's just math, so it's just a matter of time that I haven't had, but now I have a lot of, so maybe I'll figure that out in the coming months or weeks, fingers crossed weeks, but it's really months. It'll also tell me what DMX address that particular dimmer is on. And I've got my hot circuits all here as well, and I'm able to manually assign phases to those. These are all coming off of my PD. I'm able to then print sheets based on that, so I can print a dimmer report based on modules. I can do a phase report. I can do, I can click this. It'll give me by type. It'll tell me how many of each type I need. And then my other favorite thing, especially if you're working with sensor racks, portable sensor racks a lot, I came up with this, which is a sensor patch sheet. So this basically, it goes in the back. Let's open it up in preview here so we can go a little bit bigger. This is a sensor patch sheet. So essentially, if you've ever worked with a sensor portable rack before, it's got those pins. If I didn't have hot power in here and it was all sensor modules instead, this would be a little bit more useful. But I can then sit there and instead of having to cross-reference a dimmer schedule and find it and everything, this gives me just those quickly broken up groups of 6. So I say A1 goes into dimmer 201, A2 goes into dimmer 24. It tells me what type, all that. So it's been super helpful to be able to print that and just stick that right in the back of the dimmer rack for the dimmer tech who's hooking all of that up. Let's see here. What else do we have? I think that's dimmers in a nutshell. Then, of course, again, it shows me D20s. I've got 24 total, means I need 12 modules. Again, this is all stuff working in the background. So much of what we do is based on math. And so if you can figure out the math involved with it, it's really easy to make all this information super useful. Okay, so that was dimmer. And then this one is not as pretty because I'm still developing it. It actually looks really confusing when you first look at it, but this is a data run. So in this particular show, we are figuring out in advance, again, because we're speccing all of it, exactly how much cable and what cable we need to go on every single data line. It's also useful for documentation purposes because the show runs for a little over a month in a field in Florida. And so a month after we leave, a month after opening, we want whoever might be servicing this to be able to quickly figure out and troubleshoot problems. So we do, if you were in my class on Thursday night, you saw I did a whole systemizer that showed all this information. Actually, I have one for this show that I can pull up real quick. Where is it? Lighting plot. Where is it? I'm sure it's right in front of me. No, let's just do it this way. So I'm going through the plot real quick here. There it is. Oh, right, literally right in front of me. I was looking at it the whole time. Okay, so if I open up this control riser, you can see that every single one of these lines is detailed out in advance. So I know for this position, line L25 is going to be the stage right truss. So then within that, I would sit with my plot and I would figure out, okay, on line 25, I know I need a 100-foot DMX, and then it's going to be channel 21, and then a 50-foot DMX, and it's going to be channel 31, and then I need a terminator. All that stuff, again, is useful because it'll count all of those fixture types up, excuse me, cable types up for me, and then generate a shop order for them. The channels themselves, then as I put these in, it then I have a script that runs in the background that then reassociates that individual instrument record that we got from our light-write file with this particular data run. So if I click on View Instruments, it's going to take me to that table, and it's going to show me everything that is on that particular data run. So there are only 2 lights on that data run. So hopefully that makes sense. So I do all of that. I print all of this information, get all that information put in there. And then I've got, this is again not pretty right now, but I'll make it visually pretty soon. It goes ahead and it counts up all of these different fixture types for me. So I can put in notes here for the shop. I can put all that information. I can put manual spares in. So like, you know, I know that the program figured out for me that I needed 1,200-foot DMX cables. I said, okay, I'm going to add 2 as well. So the shop sees that I need 14. I'm actually able to print 2 versions of this. I'm able to print one that goes public to the shop and one that's private within the team that shows what's a spare and what's not. I can also have a box up here that I could do, let's say, add 20% spares to everything. And then I would have to go through and click the count buttons again because it's not quite automatic yet. But it would automatically add, let's say, 10% spare of all my cable, or 20% spare. Again, all just being done with math. And then the same thing again for the power. And what that generates, I'll show you the final PDF here, it generates this. So it basically says, okay, DMX5, this didn't sort properly, so you can see some of these, like 10, 100, I didn't sort them in the right order. I gotta fix that. But I'm able to generate this stuff very quickly, and it's easier than, you know, a Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. I've been wanting to work on, I need to talk to 4Wall and see how their system can integrate import. So if I could associate 4Wall item numbers or PRG item numbers with this, and then they could take a CSV and pull it right into their system and not have to do it. I wonder if that would be possible. I'll ask about that in my spare time. So next question, what all do you contribute to a shop order versus what the production electrician needs to account for? So what I'm showing you right now is kind of the full features of the program. I don't personally do this for every show that I do. For this production, this American Stage in the Park production that I'm working on that you see right in front of you, this we spec out completely in advance because the production electrician hasn't even started their contract yet by the time we need to get all this stuff into the shop. So we're doing all of this kind of on our own in advance. Now I've had some production electricians who use this as well, and then it's just kind of a back and forth thing. You know, they're able to open this program. You can open it via a web interface if I have it hosted on my server, or we just use it back and forth in Dropbox. And then of course, when we're on site, it's hosted over the network. So everybody can be logged into it and making changes at once. So this is done in collaboration with our production electricians, but the level of detail that's happening for this is not necessarily typical of every show that I do. A lot of the features that have to do with production electrician side of the program are there specifically because of this annual show that I do and the need to like document all this stuff out in advance. So typically, yeah, a lot of this would fall to that electrician, but it's not particularly in this case. Okay, so prints both of those things, as you can see, and that's basically fixtures in a nutshell. So that's we've only talked about 1/3 of the program so far. So I understand if you want to drop away because this is running way longer than I thought, but I'll try to go a little faster through some of these other things. So the other 2 big areas we've talked about: fixture information. That's one area of it. The next one is going to be work notes. So I split my work notes into 2 different categories. I have work notes and I have queue notes. So work notes are anything that is a physical note that has to get done. So for example, I can say, you know, if it's for the production electrician, if it's a focus note, we've got to rehang a light, we have to change a gel. All of that stuff would be considered a work note. If it's something that's specific for the actual programming of the show, I would put that in my queue notes. Or if it was a follow spot note, I would put that in my queue notes as well. So within this, if we open up this table again, you can see it's a series of fields again. It's got, you know, identification numbers, it's got types, it's got pictures, it's got stuff like that. I'm able to come in here and I'm able to assign a priority. So of course, high priority notes turn red and they print at the top of every list. I can choose if it's a generic note. So for me, a generic note is something like, we need to touch up all the cable, or we need to add black wrap to this whole position. So if it doesn't necessarily apply to a very specific fixture or item, it'll become a generic note. If it isn't generic, I can choose if I want it to be for a channel, a DIMM, or a circuit. And then if I come in here, let's say I put in channel 1, I can put in a note type, work note or focus note, to do, assign to the production electrician, and then who it's coming from. So in this case, it would come from me. I could type what I want here. And then a fun little thing here, if I click this button, it'll actually open up that message. It'll open up iMessage using AppleScript and send that work note to the production electrician. Kind of fun. I also can click the View Detail button. It's going to open that in a larger window, and I can drop in photos for it. And I can also see information about that particular light. Now, you might think, okay, in the heat of the moment, that's a whole lot of information to type in, right? And you're absolutely right. So I have a series of quick actions here. So we know all the time that there's going to be work notes that are going to the production electrician from the associate lighting designer. So if I click that fill button, automatically fills all that information in, and all I have to do is put a channel and a thingy and an actual note in there. Same thing for here. Loop. Can do, and I can set these 3 autofills to be whatever I want, which is pretty cool. And then I can, of course, I can see the ones that are to do. I can see the ones that are marked as discussed or to discuss. I can view ones that are complete. I can view all of that information. I can sort. That's all just, again, sorting tools. So just like you would in a spreadsheet with a database, I'm just doing finds. I'm saying, all right, when I click this button, there's a script that runs in the background that sorts and hides anything that is not complete yet. And actually, if you notice this right here, remember earlier when we were doing our fixture information and I showed you that add 132 button? It added that work note, but because I said that it was already done, it went ahead and marked it as complete. And so where that's useful is, let's say that it wasn't complete, at least I have this now, I could go back in and I could change that status if I wanted to, let's say, discuss. Show all, view discuss, view to do, view complete. Of course, there's no complete notes yet. So you get the idea of that pretty quickly. What else about these? I think that's basically it. Again, this was like the start, like this, doing the work notes like this is what started me down this whole road to begin with. I wanted an easy way to do my own work notes outside of Lightright, and this is kind of what it blossomed into. Oh, and then of course from this as well, I can turn the light on and off. So I can do that if I come in here, hopefully, yep, channel 1 is at full. Now it's not smart enough to do anything with multi-cell yet, but again, it's not designed to be a programming tool, so whatever. But if I were to come in here, let's say this is channel 71, I turn that light on, you see in the background channel 71 turned on. So this is, again, is super useful. Now, what I really want to have happen is, like, you know, there is an iPhone version of these work notes, of course. So I'll show you that real quick. Work notes. So the electrician, if they're on the network at the theater, can come in and see all of their information here. They can mark it as complete on their own. But unfortunately, you can't turn lights on and off because it has that script runs from the computer and it can't run on the iPhone. But it would be pretty cool if it could. So anyway, so that's that. Okay, so that's work notes in a nutshell. Then Q notes, it's basically the exact same interface, only I've got a little bit more information that I can put in there. So again, I can have queue numbers. I can say who they're assigned to from whatever. I've got quick fills again. And I also have this, this thing I call collection. So it'll automatically start to figure out things for me. Like, let's say time 2. As I typed in time 2, it assigned it to a timing collection. So when I say collection, basically what I mean is it's another subway to group things. So intensity, placement, and timing are the 3 that I have built in by default. And the reason for that is because a lot of times, especially with my team, when we're going to do our work notes, we say, all right, let's go ahead and knock out all of our time notes first. So I could come in here and I could say, I just want to see notes that are timing based, and it'll just show me those and I can mark them done. Same thing I can do. The intensity, if I think it recognizes certain keywords. So I say brighter, yeah, so that one just did intensity. If I put like stage management called it wrong, it would figure that out. Now, one other cool thing, and I don't actually use this, I've used it once or twice on shows where I'm my own department and I'm programming and I'm my own assistant and associate, et cetera, et cetera. It's got some, and of course I have them turned off right now, but I'm actually able to do this in a way that I can click a single button and it would send this note over to the console for me. So if I knew it was Q2, as long as I typed the note itself in EOS syntax, so if I said time 2, I could click a button and it would automatically do that note for me. You can see how that could get really complicated really quickly, which is why I don't have it turned on right now, but it is an option that I've used a couple of times, which has been pretty cool. And then of course here I also have a go to queue out button for EOS, so it'll send EOS to queue out. You see the fixtures fading away in the background. And I have a go to queue button that'll reference whatever particular queue I'm in. So right now I don't have any queues. I'm gonna go ahead and make one. So I just made 5 blank queues, right? If I hit go to Q2, you see now it's taken Q2. So I can do a lot of this within the program without having to go back and forth to the console. Again, so like depending on the level of show that I'm working on, you know, on my larger shows where I have programmers and I have union crews and stuff like that, I'm not doing a lot of this. But on some of my smaller professional theater shows where I'm programming myself or there's one other person with me, if I could send that other person to go do something else, I can hit go to Q2 and then do note, obviously, you know, watch it happen. It saves me a lot of time for having to go back and forth between my notes and the whiteboard. So what else? I also have some shortcuts built in here. I also have an iPad version of this sheet. So I can come in and I can quickly add things. iPad, Q notes. See, I've got large buttons here. So if I'm sitting there and I hear, this is again, you can tell when I built this because it has the old background and it has scroller information. I was using scrollers all the time, but I can click scroller fans and it'll automatically create a note. One of the other cool things that I'm working on right now is PMP knowing what queue you're in, because again, with that plugin I have, I can send information from the console as well. So I'm actually able to get, even without OSC working, I'm able to turn on MIDI, where is it? Somewhere I have to find it in 3.0, but it's transmitting MIDI show control messages as UDP strings. So I've got this where it can listen to that, where it can automatically advance what my active queue is within the sheet. So I don't even have to like type in a queue number. I can say note, and it'll automatically know what queue I just fired, and I can put a note in for it. So the question came in: what is this software built with? This is all built in FileMaker. So if you see up here, it's FileMaker Pro. FileMaker used to be, I believe, used to be owned by Apple a long time ago. It's its own company now, but it's a database solution. Okay, so we talked about work notes, we talked about queue notes. Let's talk about the other big chunk of the program, the other third of the program. So we talked about instruments, we talked about notes. Next, I have my queue information. So right now, I've got no information in here. Typically, I've used this 2 ways in the past. One way is once I have all my queues written, I can export them from EOS and pull them in here. I can also, if I'm doing this all as pre-production paperwork, I can put all my queue information in here first and then send that over to EOS. So let's see, I made Q1, Q2, made Q3, Q4, Q5. And again, once I get OSC stuff working a little bit better, that information could be flowing in real time. So this is the cool part. So let me go ahead and I'm going to move in my PSD. I'm going to move my label field all the way over so we can see it. I'm going to turn my notes field on, and I'm going to move it all the way over as well. Label and notes. So one of the hardest, you know, it's a pain sometimes in EOS to sit there and remember all the keyboard shortcuts to do everything. So if I have all my cues in here, I can come in here in my label field. I can type in test label. When I leave that, great. Okay, well, it appears something has changed with 3.0. So I probably should have tested this before I did it. But in theory, this would send the label over for you automatically. Oh, I know why it didn't. There it goes. I didn't have a list number specified for that first queue. So there, I can map these fields. So I mapped my label field to my label, and I mapped my description over to my test field. Excuse me, I just mapped my description over to my notes field. The other cool thing I can do about this, if I want to, I can assign scenes to these. Do these kind of in order. Again, this is all based on that scene setup that we did earlier today, or I showed you earlier. I'm just going to put in random text here for these labels. You see it all going over in real time. And then let's say, if I was sitting here and I wanted to put page numbers in for all of this, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. If I come back over to my EOS settings, I've got a couple of options here that'll allow me to send. I can clear all these over real quick. Maybe. I can send my descriptions over and it will include that page number text. Well, again, that looks like it has broken somehow in 3.0. I'll fix that. But I assign those scenes, I can send the scenes right over as well. So this is a lot easier than remembering to hit, soft keys, attributes, scene, type it in. Or, of course, most people have macros for that, but I can do it all here a hell of a lot easier than I can do it on EOS. I can clear all those scenes if I want to, set them again, clear, set. Again, and all that's doing, if we look at our diagnostics here, that's coming in and it's saying, it's a set target scene for that cue, right? Pretty simple stuff. I wonder why. It's interesting. I don't know why the page number thing isn't working, but I can also send a called by field to the beginning of it. So these are all of the stuff you're seeing in here is stuff that has been driven because of some kind of necessity that I've had on a show in the past. So this called by thing, this page thing, is because I had a stage manager who was running the console and wasn't super comfortable with it. So what I was able to do was I was able to come in here and I can say called by stage manager. I could send that information over to their sheet so they could see really quickly if they were calling this cue, or if it was an auto follow, or if it was a time code or whatever. So all that stuff is in there as well. Okay, so that's notes that's cues in a nutshell. I don't think there's anything else interesting. Obviously, all of these other fields here, these will, if I did an import, they would come over, and I've got an option I can turn on to do direct edits to EOS. So if I were to change this time here, it would send that time over to the console, et cetera, et cetera. Great. It also supports parts and stuff like that. I can flag things with different emojis if I wanted to, and then search by those emojis, all kinds of stuff like that. And also see highlight changes since a certain date, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, a couple more questions just came in, and then I'll jump to the last part of the software here. Do I have any option for designing or recording rehearsals? Cue synopsis, record data. So I typically, in my process, I just record a rehearsal design and run on a GoPro, and I mark it up in my script, and then from there it becomes other information. I'm gonna, I use Stamp. For those of you who have followed me for a while, you've seen some of my stuff I've written about Stamp. I use Stamp for in the tech room, in the tech rehearsal documentation. But I don't use it in the rehearsal room yet, and there's not really a reason I don't. I could start it's again changing old habits. And then when it comes to like cue synopsis and stuff like that, I don't really. I know a lot of people like sit there and do an entire spreadsheet of what every single cue is going to do. Well, and I just don't. I'll write like, well, a change or a color change. I'll kind of know. I'll go through the script several times, but I don't really document all of that. Because again, it's not going to help anybody but me. The cue sheets I'm going to give to a board op or to somebody else just need to have the basic information in them. Okay, so follow spot cues is the next thing. So this show, right now, this show file has 2 follow spots in it. It has data from a gentleman's guide that you can see here. This looks like a lot of information at once on your screen, but once you start to kind of dive into it, it makes a whole lot of sense. So again, with the follow spot stuff is probably the most complicated table in the database. So there's a whole lot of fields in there because it supports up to 4 follow spots. So every single record that exists has actions for up to 4 spots. Like right now, of course, these other 2 have disappeared because I only have 2 specified. Well, actually, before I jump into the cues, I'll show you how they're set up. So over here under follow spots, I've got a setup for it. So I can set up what type it is. Similar again to this is similar to Spot Track, which is also a program that was based in FileMaker. But I set up my color frames, I set up the locations. This is a cool new thing we're doing. I'm actually able to specify a channel number in EOS. So for this particular show, we use BMFL blades and have them controlled with Lightmaster rigs. So I was able to specify this, and you'll see why that's cool in a second. I set up my sizes, I set up my actions, all of that kind of stuff that you would normally have with follow spot tracking information to make follow spot tracking sheets. The other cool part here is I'm able to color frame 1. I'm able to map that to EOS color palettes. I'm able to map frost palettes within EOS as well as intensity palettes. And you're going to see why that's, hopefully your mind's already working. You see how that can become very useful in a second with all the EOS integration stuff I've showed you. But if it doesn't, I'll show you in a second. But I can set up all kinds of fun stuff there. And then when I'm in here, I'm basically saying, okay, I choose an action, I choose a character. All this stuff is all set up on those other screens. I can choose a color, a location. I can link it to to a light cue. So for example, 3.9, 3.95, those were lighting cue numbers that were in my other show. Let's see, actually, let me go get that show file real quick, and then this would be a better demo for that. So production, gentleman's guide, show files, opening. And I'm just gonna put that on my desktop. Copy and paste. Okay, so I'm gonna open that up real quick here. I'm not gonna save the old one. 637 cues in that show, wow. Okay, so here we have an actual show file with actual data in it, right? Let me go ahead and change our settings again one more time here because it's not going to be set up for communication. Still getting used to this new interface. Oh, it is set up. Okay, great. Okay, so you can see I've got all this cue information in here all ready to go. So all of the cues that you see, these are spot numbers. So spot 0.5, spot 0.7, these are associated with lighting cue 3.9, 3.95. So you can see in here, all of those things exist within this PSD. If I change over to list 2, now hopefully you'll get an idea of how powerful this software can be. So because these spots were controlled from the console, what I was able to do was send over all of the various information it needs, including all of the focus palette, color palette information, stuff like that, and in blind automatically dump over all of my follow spot cues. So now it even puts in descriptions for them. It parts them out. So spot 1 is always in part 1. Spot 2 is always in part 2. Tells you exactly what the cue line is. Puts timing information in. Puts the lights into the right palettes based on color, intensity, et cetera, et cetera. Dumps scenes over, does all of that. So before, when we were doing this back and forth with like luster units or our BMFL follow spots, it was two sets of data entry, right? You'd have to create follow spot sheets. You'd have to do all of the paperwork for the actual manual operators or whoever was calling the show. But then you'd have to go back and program all that same information into the console again, which was a whole, that's several hours worth of work. So using this, it sends them over one at a time, just so Abby, who did this all, can monitor, make sure everything's happening properly. But it saves hours of programming time. It also makes a cleaner show file. Right now, the two things that it doesn't do well are marks, because we don't auto mark our shows when we're doing shows of this complexity. Everything is manually marked. One of my big EOS feature requests is, and I've requested it several times. I see Jake, I see you on this, so take a note of this, please. Is that you can turn auto mark on and off on a cue list by cue list basis. It'd be a game changer for me. So obviously, like with this, I don't need to worry about mark times for my follow spots because they're going to turn off. I want the light to change color in the background or change frost, and then it's going to come back on. Thanks, Jake. So if I could just say, list 2 auto mark, that would be great. So instead, what we do is I have some stuff built in where it automatically can create marks, but we're still, Dalton, the programmer, has been going through and just marking stuff manually. But again, that 10 minutes of time that it takes to just quickly go through this cue list, and that 10 minutes it takes is way better than the hours it would take to program this to begin with. Great. How many months to build this file? Well, the program itself, I started in 2014 again, so it's been about 6 years worth of development on it. This particular file, I don't know, this probably took Abby 2 days to build all the follow spot cues, but that's because, again, she's going with the script. She's doing just what I'm doing when I'm planning my lighting cues, The reason these are highlighted in red is because they haven't been sent over yet. I gotta fix that, actually, because they have been sent over. But you see there's scene names, all that stuff in here, just like before. So during tech, she's updating this and it's sending information back and forth and keeping it super up to date. The other cool thing it does, and this is actually where this integration started, was before we had it where it was before we were able to program the stuff where it was just sending over that palette information and that data, we had it so that it would automatically link our executes for us. So all of these queues that happen in list 2 are linked to an actual queue that happens in list 1. And so before to do that, again, there is an hour worth of programming time, right? Where the associate or the assistant has to sit with the programmer and say, okay, Q1 linked to this queue, Q2 linked to this queue. So what I'm able to do is, because this information all exists, I'm able to put those external links and it sends them over automatically. If you check out my Instagram page, you'll see I have a video of this happening where I click one button and it goes queue by queue and it drops all those executes over. So you can see queue, execute 2/1, et cetera, et cetera. So that's follow spot queues. It's also, there's note taking available for the assistant or the associates who's doing them. It's got operator memos. It's got basically everything you can think of really there to send information over. Let's see here. Anything else? Oh, then the last little thing I'll show you here is the printing features of it. So I've showed you a lot of data, right? And you've kind of seen, as I pop through some of this stuff, you've seen how some of the paperwork looks. And again, if you've been checking out my stuff for a while, you've seen this paperwork before. But this is one of my other big reasons for developing this. So the main reason again was work notes, but then I wanted my own style to my paperwork. Everybody's paperwork looks the same in LightWrite. And there's nothing wrong with that. In a way that's kind of a good thing, because people can go from show to show and be familiar. But I just wanted a different style. So I created this, and so all my paperwork looks very similar now. And you can see all of this information that we've input in all these various places in the program is all referenced back on all of these individual PDFs. Here's our phase reports, dimmer details, sensor rack hookup. This is a schedule of that data lines, like I showed you before. So it shows you what order things are on the data line. Circuit hookup sheets, all the paperwork that you would normally find, and then you show anything that LightWrite can do, this can do as well. Channel hookups, instrument schedules, break-in schedules, breakout schedules, basically everything you can think of. But the coolest part about it is that, in LightWrite and in a lot of other programs, you have to generate each one of those things manually, or you have to generate it as one big PDF. So what I have here is I have a folder on my desktop called Review, and with a click of a single button, it's now going to drop in PDFs for all of that various paperwork. Hopefully, there it comes. It's going to drop in anything I specify on my printing screen here. It's going to go through and make a PDF of it for me. So then I can come in here, I can just proofread these really quickly. If I like them, I highlight them all, I drop them into my Dropbox, and they're done. I don't have to sit there for a half hour and export every single piece of paperwork as I need it. I also have that set up for work notes. So I can print work notes right from this, same way with PDFs. I can send them directly to Dropbox, or I can email them. So if I click the email button, I can say I want to who I'm printing from. I can type in a body of the email, and then I can say if I want to send all of my work notes to the production electrician. If I click that button right now, it would open up a window and automatically email a PDF of all of those work notes to that electrician. Again, all based on that stuff we set up earlier in the thing. So it goes and it finds, all right, who's the production electrician? All right, what's their email address? And automatically drops that in for me. I'm also able to print character headshots, actor headshots, things like that. I can show you an example. You've seen that before. What do my work note printed pages look like? Okay, let me go to a show that we've completed so you can see what those look like. Use one of the Google Drive shows that we have here. Stand by. I've been having a fun problem lately where all the shortcuts that I've set up in my sidebar in Google Drive disappear every time Google Drive unmounts, so that's fun. Okay, so here's Mamma Mia from last year in the park. This will have, come on, park, Mamma Mia, there it is. Production, lighting. You notice that all of it, for those of you who have done a couple of these with me, you've seen that like all of my folder structures are even the same from show to show. So let's go to the work notes folder here. So here's an example of a work notes file. So I have two different ones. Like this is a queuing one, so it does them by this does them by type. Oh, excuse me. This is a work notes by type. I also have a detail view that I can print. That'll print information about the individual light as well as the details. And of course, if one of these was high priority, it would jump up to the top. Some of the archived ones. Work notes again. So this is kind of a quick checklist that they can print off, or we can print that other one for them. And I think I'll show you what the final, yeah, so here's some spot cue sheets. So it does a master sheet where it does the two side by side. This was from Mamma Mia last year. It also then does individual spot cue sheets. So again, it gives you your color information. Again, this is similar to Spot Track in the way that it's designed. Prints scene breaks, song breaks, all that kind of stuff. Colors, gives you color swatches, which is, I find, super helpful. And we print all this paperwork even when we have the board controlling the follow spot sheet. And the reason for that is because I want the operators to know what's going on. And then in addition to that, if for some reason the board lost control and they had to run the show manually, which there'd be bigger problems if that was the case, but I'd like to be able to say that they could easily go in and do that based on the paperwork if they had to. So let me open up a couple of years ago. I can show you a better cue sheets, isn't it? Score cue sheets, there we go. It prints, this is the actor headshot sheet. So you can put in dance numbers. So a lot of times when we're doing shows, there will be, you know, for the first day of tech, especially in the park, everybody will be wearing a dance number on them. So for the follow spots, that's a super easy way for them to learn them. So that it'll print there and say what their dance number is, so people can get used to them. Then we print these and we hand them to the follow spot ops. I'll answer those other questions in a second, but I think that's just about it. I can also print, you know, I can print call sheets, so I can print a report of all of my cues that only the stage manager calls, which is super useful. I can say, all right, here, stage manager, this is just a list of cues that you're calling in the show. I can print little line set cards. You know, oh, I can't because there's no line sets in the show. There we go. I can print individual little cards for each position. I can print sheets. And then, of course, there's all kinds of label printing involved. So this is kind of more behind the scenes, but I've got, if you look at this list, all of these various different labels are all ready to go. So I can come in here, I can say these large labels for things. I've got, they're all formatted for different Dymo labels, but all kinds of label printing is available from this. All the way down to, I even have these that show dimmer, that show color RAM 2 scroller and dip switch settings, which are also, it'll automatically detect in your instrument setup if you're using a color RAM, and if it does, it gives you dip switch options. And so I can print these labels for them. I can also print individual, that's not the right thing. I can print circuit labels, you know, and then from show by show, I can come in here and I can customize what this label looks like. So actually, typically right now, we'd be getting ready to print all of these things because our shop prep for this show would be next week. But unfortunately, this show is canceled, or it's postponed. So, all right, so that's labels. I'm gonna get to everybody's questions in 1 second. If you have any other questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat and I will get to them. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm forgetting here that I haven't shown you. And again, like this, you know, it prints a track date, prints all that information. If you notice, if I go back to even this paperwork, that information shows up down here. It says what the track date was, the time, printed at 3 a.m. You can tell we were working outside on that particular show. I think that's all the main functions. And again, yeah, I've got, you know, there's an iPad version, an iOS version, and all is shared over the network. So like right now you see there's little red icons by Dalton and Abby here. If we were on the same network and they could actually log into this file and make their changes all hosted off my computer. I also have a FileMaker server that I run on Amazon that I use in pre-production. So I can throw this, instead of being hosted on a local machine, it'll go on my AWS machine, and then anybody from anywhere in the world can sign into it, assuming they have a password. So that's the other thing, is it's all password protected, so don't think you can get into the files here. Okay, so I'm gonna get to a couple of the questions, and we'll go from there. So, showed you that. Paperwork do I bring for load-in? I don't really bring any. I don't usually go to the load-ins for a lot of these shows. I'm usually on other projects, and I get there in time for the focus call or to start programming. But really, all of this stuff is sent. So if we go and we look, for example, like Footloose in the Park, you know, we have our working folder that has all of our stuff. But then in the public folder that's shared with the whole company, we have a plots and paperwork folder that has a PDF of every single piece of paperwork that anybody could need to do this show. And we keep this pretty up to date. So it's got all the pages of the plot are in there, all the various other stuff is in there. So whatever the people need. We also, for this particular show, we do detail pages for each individual position as well. And again, this is not necessarily typical of work I would do on a lot of my shows. This is typically something a production electrician would do. But again, because we have such we've been doing this show for 7 years, my team and I have been doing this particular show for 7 years now, our Vectorworks file has all these viewports, has all this stuff set up. So it's actually really easy to do now. We just go in, we update the positions, and we just update a couple of viewports here or there, and it's good to go. Print cable labels, yep. So we do, like I showed you, we do all kinds of cable print labels for literally everything. Core concept behind the portal is basically, again, to have one source of all of my information in one place. Like, hopefully I've been able to illustrate over this last hour how powerful it is to be able to have information that relates to two different sets of information that are related, and be able to use that relationship back and forth in order to create reports or to manipulate things. You know, all that stuff that I'm doing to send over all the queue information, all that kind of stuff is all possible because those relationships exist within the database. Next question, can I explain what the options are for paperwork titles? Sure. So this is just specific to me. I use a series of letters and numbers to do paperwork revisions. So for me, A is any kind of preliminary submittal paperwork, rough drafts. B is load in, C is focus, and D is archival. So within those, there'll be multiple revisions. So if we look right here at this Footloose Google Drive folder, A01 was our prelim. And of course, there was only one thing in there at that time. But I'm able to track that information because it's printed on every single piece of paper. So my next one was A02. I've got all of this various stuff in there. So real quick, if I can show you a better example of that, if I go to Gentleman's Guide, which is what we just did before the big shutdown here, and we go to our archive, you can see there's 5 folders worth of archival stuff in here. And each one of those has all of the paperwork for that particular revision. So I love having all the information possible in one place. And I get specifically into this actually on Tuesday night. I'm doing a lighting paperwork webinar. So check out my website for information on that. But I'm going to go not in depth about any particular software, but more about my work, about how this all fits together. But you see, like, CO3 is right in the file name. CO3 is down here in the title block. If I go to this piece of paper, CO3 is printed right there. Again, so that whoever is using that piece of paperwork knows that it matches the revision of the plot that they're looking at. Because, I mean, again, like if we look at the dates on this, the first version of this plot came out, I guess there was no A on this, so end of January, and then before 20th of February, we had 5 other revisions. So you can see like how quickly that information can get lost. So I like having that information readily accessible and available, ready to go. I like how people, yeah, and people set up, I have an Instagram option. That's more of a personal thing. Like if I click it, it'll take you to their Instagram. I've been wanting to work on a thing, you know, I post a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And so I wanted an easy way to quickly tag a bunch of people. And that's the whole idea there, is eventually I want to make a script that it'll send me a text message with just like all of the handles as text, so I don't have to type them all in manually. Same thing for the people set up on characters. There's an Instagram field there too. It doesn't really do anything right now, but one day it might. Okay, so I think I've taken plenty of your time. I will be hanging out for another 8 minutes or so to answer any other questions. So feel free to hang out, ask some questions in the chat. If you want to jump on video, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. But otherwise, I hope you all got something out of this. And again, I'm going to put some more videos on YouTube. This whole session that I just did will also be available on YouTube, as well as all the other webinars that I'm doing on this little hiatus from work that we all seem to find ourselves in. I'm almost done editing the one from Thursday night, and that'll be up very soon. So feel free to sign off. I'm going to go ahead and answer some more questions, though. And here they all come in. Any resources I found helpful for learning FileMaker development? So when I started, again, I didn't know anything. I just would Google things and try to figure them out. There's a couple people, just like in our industry, where there's a couple of people that are on all the forums that are super, super helpful. There are people like that on the FileMaker forums too, and some of them have answered so many of my questions over the years. But when it really started to jump off for me was when United Scenic Art, or actually when IATSE in general, started offering lynda.com subscriptions for all of their members for like $25. And now, of course, Lynda is LinkedIn Learning, and it's now free for IA members, or at least for USA members. And so I just watched a bunch of tutorials on stuff, and that's when I went back and cleaned up as much of the old code as I could. But there's still some stuff in there that, like, if a professional FileMaker developer looked at the under the nuts and bolts of this file, they would scream. But it works for me. So, and some of the newer, I've made some other tools for people. I've got some friends who are assistants and associates on various productions, and I've made them like focus photo tools or work note tools and stuff like that. So if you're interested in any of that, I'm available for commissions on that now that I know a little bit more. And I use FileMaker in my everyday life. My fiance and I did our entire wedding RSVP database system all based in FileMaker, where everybody has their own codes and stuff like that. So, next question. Yes, I am uploading this on YouTube. Have I talked with other designers? Yes. So I have talked with some other people who have made their own versions of stuff like this. So many people have so many different versions of their own FileMaker programs, right? Jake DeGroot has one. Corey Paddock, of course, has Spot On that he's made. There's a whole bunch of other ones as well. And I've gotten some ideas from them. They've hopefully gotten some ideas from me. Jake DeGroot was actually instrumental in giving me the ideas for those plugins, because that's what he was using to communicate with EOS. And so he gave me that the initial ideas for that, the initial concepts, and I kind of ran with them. In addition to that, he also there's a lot of the stuff with the UDP strings and EOS is not actually fully documented by ETC. I think probably for good reasons. And so there's a lot of that, and I explained some of it in my YouTube video again. So he was helpful in getting some of that for me. And then again, like this is, you see elements of Lightright in this, you see elements of Spot On in this, you see elements of Spot Track in this, you see elements of all these programs. I think that's true of all of us who have kind of come up with our own systems. You use the stuff that works, you make it work for you, and it kind of blossoms from there. Okay, more questions. I don't have any of my own show files that are public, and the reason for that is because they're not necessarily just my show files. I work with programmers and work with other people who have their intellectual property involved with those shows as well. So I can't promise anything right now, but I'll talk with my team a little bit, and maybe we can release maybe the Gentleman's Guide file or something like that, so you can kind of see how some of that is laid out. Let's see here. What else do we have? Anything for Grand MA? So I'm actually a relatively new MA user. I've only really been using it for about a year now, and only on my corporate projects. So I am not the guy to ask when it comes to MA questions. Christian Jackson has thousands of videos on YouTube. Go check his stuff out. But maybe one day, if we'll see. I don't know. I had a couple of you privately have messaged me asking about if I'm ever going to make this public. And I'll say the thing I've always kind of said. And the short answer is no. And it's not for any selfish reasons or anything. Well, it is a little selfish, but I don't have time to support a user base of the program. I've got maybe 2 people that use it on their shows here and there that are good friends of mine that have been around developing this with me from the beginning. And so because of that, I don't have time to support it. I experimented with it a couple of years ago. I had 5 or 6 people using it, and it was just, again, because I'm not a software developer. So it was a lot of late nights of me fixing something for somebody because they had a show the next day. And I just don't have the time to do that with the rest of my professional work that I have going on. Now, what I have considered doing is doing some parts of the software that could be standalone. Again, like I made there was a Broadway tour that I made a focus photo tool for, and that seemed to work pretty well. Like I'd be interested in doing stuff like that. I've also made a pretty cool tool where I can automatically generate QLab show control files based on your cue sheet. So let's say, for example, I wanted to create OSC cues in QLab for every single one of my light cues in EOS. I've made a little tool that can do that. Stuff like that I'm considering commercially releasing, stuff that is very simple and like one purpose instead of all encompassing. Okay, other questions? Trying to connect projection. Okay, well that's a different topic altogether, but projection through QLab, you have to do something with siphon screens, and that's something I'm not super familiar with. I think it might have been you who asked it, but if you go into the Capture Facebook group, you'll find somebody just asked that question, so you might find some information there. Real quick, again, before I sign off, I got about 2 minutes left. Tuesday night, I'm going to be doing, actually, I'm just going to pull up the site here for you. Oops, that's NHL TV. That's not what you want. So if you go to mikewoodld.com/classes, you'll find my next couple things. Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, I will be doing a webinar on lighting plots and paperwork. Nothing super specific about any one given piece of software. It is more of an introductory thing, so if you're a student or you know students, please send them to that. Then on Thursday night, I'm going to be doing more of a deep dive into how my Vectorworks base file is laid out and kind of how I use Lightright and Vectorworks back and forth to manipulate show data and make a plot. And then, of course, every Wednesday night for as long as this lasts at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm hosting a weekly beer night. This week, I'm going to start having some discussion topics. Last week, we had about 13 to 15 people. So just place to come hang out, ask some questions. We had a mixture of students and professionals and programmers and electricians and everybody you could think of last week. So hopefully that grows. There's also a calendar here with all of that. Towards the end of this week, I will announce what I'm going to do next week. Okay. Any other questions? Great. Some of you asked some private questions, so I will answer those. I'll just answer those now because it'll be easier than sending messages. Great. Yeah. So those of you who asked some private questions, I will reach out to you privately. But long story short, for everybody, for the 8 different messages that I've got asking if you could be the exception to get a copy of the software, I'm sorry, I can't. I have to kind of stick to that thing I've made for myself. I promise you that if I ever do anything public, I will announce it right away. But my goal with all of this is to help anybody who wants to make their own solution. You've got a lot of time in the next couple of months, a lot of us, unfortunately, so that's really the best I can offer right now. And again, I'm sorry, I wish I could. I don't have the time and the bandwidth to support something like that right now. Great. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off, and I hope you all got something, and I will see you again on Tuesday. Thank you all.